Hi everyone. Are you a little squished right now? Sorry about that. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. Thanks for putting this together. My name is Scott Hanselman, and I'm an old person on the internet. Does anyone have no idea who I am, but you came to this thing anyway? You're good. Are you like do Ruby, or are you a spy? Are you from AWS? No. How did you get hooked up with this? Your friend said you got to go to the thing. Oh, but you don't know me from anybody, right? Okay, cool. So I've been on the internet for a long time. Um, I've got a blog, and if you go to my blog and we go to date, the blog has been going since April of 2002, and that's at hanselman.com/blog. That is separate from Hanselman.com, which is another web application. And then I've got a podcast called Hansel Minutes because I'm a really bad estimator. If someone says how long something will take, I might say, yeah, about 30 minutes. And they'll say, are those Hansel minutes or like minutes that I can count on? And Hansel minutes are a couple of hours, right? Now, this show here is a podcast that I've had, and I've had this podcast for over 970 episodes. So that's every Thursday for the last 18 years. So if you haven't heard on that podcast, you should check it out. A lot of podcasts out there in the world are just two dudes on Skype talking about JavaScript. So you know who you are. This show is the anti that show. There's lots of different people. You can see here that I'm still scrolling as I'm talking, and I'm not running out of people, not running out of a diverse crowd of cool people talking about cool stuff. I can actually go faster, and I still won't run out of people. Isn't that funny how they're saying there might be a pipeline problem, or I can't find any women to speak at my conference? Well, here's 900. Feel free to go back and check the show out. And if you've never heard of the show, you only have 900 episodes to catch up on, which is just 17 years of content, 450 hours, but it has searchable transcripts. So if you want to find out just the shows where we talked about Azure, you can go and find those shows. I'm still going, and I'm just now in the 400s. Okay? Content, 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 people. Why do I have all this content? That's because I don't like answering email. So what does that mean? My philosophy for many, many years has been to not waste my keystrokes. Let's say you and I are now buddies, not because you've never met me before, but afterwards you're like, oh my God, Hanselman was amazing. I love that guy. I'm going to email him a question. And he emails me a question. And I don't know you, right? I'm not going to give you the gift of my keystrokes. 2,000 keystrokes? You ask a great question, and I'm like, tap, 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 tap. Here's the keystrokes. Here's the answer. And he goes, thanks. Where do those keystrokes go? Into the ether. And I got a thanks out of it. This is really important. You have a finite number of keystrokes left in your hands before you die. This gentleman is a crisp 29, and he types 80 words a minute. So he has 281 million keystrokes left. That's it. That's if you're typing full time. Those numbers are actually going down now because you're not currently typing. You're not typing right now. So you have 93 novels left in your hands. AI is not going to give you any more of that. These are your keystrokes. The time is passing. So if he emails me after this talk, that's great. It's a gift. It's a question that I maybe wouldn't have thought of. And what's cool about that is that's a gift. I should do something about it. But if I then just give him my keystrokes, no one else saw them. So what should you do if someone does that? You should write a blog post and then send him a link to the blog post and then go to sleep. And then if another person visits the blog, now two people have seen it. People need to have a blog. Not enough people are blogging right now. I wrote a long time ago that your blog is the engine of community. This is where it all starts. People are not telling their stories enough. People are giving Elon Musk their stories. People are giving Zuckerberg your stories. You're putting all of your stories into walled gardens in URLs that you do not own. I've been blogging for 20 years, and I own these URLs. I haven't broken a URL in 20 years. When URLs change structure, I've gone out of my way to make sure that my blog stays that way. So there was a blog post that I did once called URLs are UI. And I wrote it, and it was actually at an ASPX page, and it went viral on Hacker News, and it was all about how URLs are just as important as the rest of your UI. And they said, how dare you, as a man with a .aspx at the end of your URL, say to us that URLs are UI. So then I went and I changed the URL structure of my entire blog. So now if you visit this URL, you will get a redirect to a URL the way the kids are doing URLs now. This is called kebab case, right? There's camel case, there's Pascal case, and then there's kebabs like that. It's important, though, that you'll still find the old link to the old URL, but you can't break a URL, right? URLs are UI, so I changed it. So every single URL for the last 20 years all changed to this new format. It makes sense? So I've got all this content. Let me give you an idea how much content is here. So again, these are all emails I did not send. I'm going to hold down space. Now this looks impressive, right? But I'm not like here to impress you. I'm just trying to make the point. Every one of these is an email I didn't have to send. Emails are where keystrokes go to die. Stop sending emails. No one's reading your email. Nobody cares. If you write an email for like a paragraph or two, and then you start to scroll, that's when you've just lost half your audience. No one at work is scrolling into your emails. What should you do then? You should put your keystrokes anywhere with a URL. SharePoint, Word document, Wiki, OneNote. It doesn't matter. Somewhere that it can then multiply and work when you're asleep. Right? How many times has someone written up some wonderful instruction about how to do something, some playbook at work, and then that person quits, we lose access to their inbox, and then we end up digging up emails that they may have forwarded around. Instead, you should write these things on a blog, on a wiki, on a OneNote, somewhere in a SharePoint, and then put the URL in the email. Why am I telling you this? Because I've been blogging at this place for so long, I need to keep it up. I need to keep it alive. It's legacy software. This was written in 2002. And there are 3 websites that we're talking about here. Apparently, I'm running some confidential version of Notepad. And they put a badge there. So I'm sorry. Whoever's watching this is going to get me fired. Okay. 3 websites. Hanselman.com. Hanselman.com/blog. Different app. Separate site. And then Hansel Minutes, the podcast. That's Hanselman International, right? The global superpower that is me at home. And then there's other little websites like keysleft.com, Baby Smash, which is a game I made for babies. It's not about smashing babies. It's for babies that are smashing. I wrote it for my son, who is over there. He's 17. So that's also a legacy application. But if you go to babysmash.com, you can download that, and it literally just like puts colorful things on the screen for babies to laugh at. Okay, so Hanselman International, which I'm joking about, it's really just me. It makes $0. Has been on a machine for a very long time because I was a Microsoft MVP for a while. It's like they just kind of like, you're loud. Here's some free stuff. That's basically what a Microsoft MVP is. And it's most valuable professional. It's just people who blog a lot, and they give you free stuff, and then companies will give you free stuff. And there was a company called OrcsWeb, and OrcsWeb said, hey, MVPs, you all get a VM, a virtual machine. VMs had just started. This is 20 years ago, and they said, you're going to get a VM. It's going to be Windows Server 2000, and it's a $50 value. So I'm like, hey, free VM, rock on. I'll call OrcsWeb. Hey, I'm important. I'm fancy. Give me a virtual machine. So then I went and I ran Hanselman.com on IIS, Internet Information Server, on .NET 1.1, on a Windows Server 2000 machine, and it was cool. And I started just putting all my stuff there. And, when you get free stuff, you get a little spoiled, right? You just like, hey, free stuff. I'm just going to use like borrowing a car. You don't drive a borrowed car the way you drive your car. You abuse it. All right, so I abused the hell out of this thing, and because it's free. So then OrcsWeb one day got bought by a French-Canadian company called SureWeb, And I didn't really think anything of it. I got an email that says, "Oh, we've been bought by the French. Oh, sure web, great, great." You know, I'm like, okay, that's cool. The website kept running. I didn't really sweat it. Then I started getting in 2020 a yellow screen of death. You know what the yellow screen of death is, right? Yeah, yellow screen of death picture. No, exception. Looks like this, right? The yellow screen of death is really the worst. The yellow screen of death tells you not only that there's an error, but also that you've poorly configured your site and you're seeing the default error. And then sometimes the yellow screen of death will actually show you the source code of why you suck and then show the customer the actual line number that the mistake that you made. So I started getting a yellow screen of death on my 20-year website that said disk full. So then it started being like people were tweeting me with like screenshots of my disk being full. So it's just the most embarrassing thing possible. So I call the French Canadians and I'm like, "Hey, it's Scott Hanselman. I need you to go and clear the disk on my VM." And they say, "Qu'est-ce que c'est? Who are you?" Right? I'm like, "Oh, I'm Scott Hanselman. You gave me a virtual machine." "When?" "Well, back in 2002, you know." They said, "Oh, yeah, we heard about that. You know, that promotion wasn't very popular." "What do you mean it wasn't very popular?" "Well, we thought all the MVPs would flock and then get free VMs and then they would buy additional stuff, but only you. Uh, Only you, Scott, ended up using the virtual machine." And then we sold the company to the French, and I don't know where your computer is. I said, "What do you mean you don't know where my computer is? It's a VM." They said, "Well, it was supposed to be a VM, but we never actually VM'd it. It was actually just a mini tower under Anna's desk." And I was like, "Well, get Anna on the phone." And they said, "Well, Anna doesn't work here anymore." So have you ever seen the end of Indiana Jones, right? The end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm going to date myself with some of these references. That's fine. I don't care. At the end of Indiana Jones, they take the Ark of the Covenant and they put it in a warehouse, right? So this is what a data center looks like. Somewhere in their data center is my computer. Somewhere in French Canada is a little mini server that's there. And I said, "What do you mean it's not a virtual machine?" "No, it's a physical machine." And I said, "You promised me you'd have a virtual machine backing my stuff up." And they said, "About your backups." It's never actually been backed up because it was never really a real thing. And I said, "I've been running on spinning Rust, like actual spinning hard drives for the last 17 years. That's really dangerous, right? You understand the idea that backups always work. It's restores that fail. People never test restores. They just go, "Yeah, it backed up," right? When was the last time you actually tore the machine down and did a restore? So I realized that I've been running on borrowed time. Now, do you know what the MTBF is? The MTBF. It is the mean time before failure. Does anyone know what the mean time before failure of an average spinning Rust hard drive is? Yeah, at 40,000 hours? Yeah, that's not 17 years. So if you think about the way the normal curve works, the normal curve, it goes like the normal distribution is like that, right? I'm on the far end of this, it's like finding a car with like 50,000 miles on it, and then another car has a 500,000 miles on it. And everyone has a Honda that's got a 500,000 miles on it, but that's not a normal thing for a car. It's not normal for a hard drive to be running for 17 hours. Additionally, if you've ever had a car, or maybe like an uncle or an auntie who has like a really old car, and they always leave it running because they won't be able to get it to start again. So they come to your house, they leave the car running, they pick up whatever they're going to pick up, and then they get back in the car and you push it. If I stopped this computer, it was never going to start again, right? Because it's spinning, and once it stops, it's never going to start again. You can't push a hard drive. Now, for some of you all look kind of fresh-faced and kind of young, so let's make sure that we know what a spinning Rust hard drive looks like, because you might be like, "Spinning? What's spinning inside the hard drive?" Right? This is basically, yeah, see, look at that. Even Google is like, "Oh, look, that's what a hard drive looks like." No, it's not. It freaking looks like this, you guys. It looks like that. It's spinning metal. And when we talk about hard drive crashes, literally we're metal against metal. Like you knew when a hard drive crashed now. When an SSD crashes, your computer, and that's all an SSD crashes. But like freaking hard drive crashes were like nails on a chalkboard. It was a moment. It was like I heard that crash and it hurt me in my chest, right? So I immediately go and I FTP for the young people. I FTP all the data off the hard drive as quickly as I possibly can, and I said, well, all the issue is that it says disk full. It's a 30 gig disk, 30 gigs. You understand how small 30 gigs is in 2023, people? I've accidentally swallowed 30 gigs, right? Just moving stuff. You put an SSD in, you put like an SD card in your mouth, and you go, right? And you're not going to dig that up later, right? That's done. You're never getting that data back, no matter how much you go digging for it. 30 gigs is not a lot. And I wanted them to go and expand it or maybe put another hard drive in. And they said, no, we just don't want your business anymore. You need to get off of this. Now, this is a funny story, but it's also a true story. We have here a legacy system, right? This is a legacy system that is running on a non-cloud. So what's the right way to move this to Azure? What's the correct way to move this to Azure? Because everybody's got this. I'm joking about my blog here, but everyone's got some old machine that runs some crucial part of their business, and it's running under someone's desk. So what's the naive way to move to Azure, friends? Come on. What's that? Physical to virtual, that's a great answer. So there's a thing called disk to VHD, which is a tool from Mark Rasinovich and friends. We can go and look at disk to VHD. And I'll go and Google with Bing for disk to VHD. And it'll create a virtual hard disk from physical disks. Fantastic. Works great if I could actually remote desktop into this particular machine. So that would be one option though, right? Another idea would be to have them find the computer and mail it to me, but there's no way it's going to survive in doing that. At this point, I had to decide, even if I did that, let's say I did a disk to VHD, I'm going to take a 20-year-old Windows server, right, and freeze dry it, turn it into a VHD, and then spin it up. And now what have I accomplished? I have a 20-year-old Windows server, except now it's in the cloud, right? That is naive. I use that word naive very intentionally because it's the simplest thing you can do. It's called lift and shift. That's what the consultants would call it. I call it a naive move to the cloud. Because what do I have to deal with here? Right now I'm dealing with a dying physical hardware. And if you move that into the cloud using IaaS, right, infrastructure as a service, I just want to run my freaking blog. But what am I having to do? The care and feeding of a Windows Server 2000 machine? That's not cool. I just want to run my blog. It's not my job to deal with hard drives. Fine, I'll move it into the cloud. Well, then it's my issue to deal with operating systems and certificates and SSL certs and different versions of TLS. I found out that if you wanted to have a high security rating, if you go to security headers.com, and you can go and put in something like hanselman.com. It'll go and scan your site and tell you whether or not all your headers are correct, and it'll give you an A, and it'll tell you if it's a good site or not, right? In order to do that, you need TLS 1.2 and 1.3, which are all different ways to negotiate an SSL certificate. This was invented after that. You cannot get Windows Server 2000 to give you a passing grade because it's simply not secure. It's a different internet. So again, I want to run my apps. Why am I thinking about these other levels? So I wanted to ask myself, what's the right level to come at this at? But I also have to deal with the fact that I'm running on .NET 1.1 and I'm running on Windows. So there's a lot to absorb here. But in the short term, yes, moving it over there would be a way to do it. But one of the benefits is I happen to be using .NET. And .NET, even though it was written in this case in 2002 on a Windows machine, was surprisingly portable. We saw that with things like the Mono project, which would let you run .NET applications on Linux 15 years ago. And then .NET Core, which started at .NET Core 1.0 about, how many years has it been now? 12? It's been a minute. When did .NET Core come out? 2016? Has it only been 7 years? That's some bullshit. Okay, but still, it's pretty long. 7 years is long for, not long for me, but for a young person, it could be long. So .NET Core, though, was cross-platform. So there is a thing called the .NET Upgrade Assistant. I don't actually know how to spell. I just let Google handle it for me. And the .NET Upgrade Assistant will actually go and look at the intermediate language that your application creates and look for portability issues. Are you using backslashes instead of forward slashes, and it might have a problem with the file system? Are you talking to the registry? Are you calling COM objects? Are you using controls that don't exist cross-platform? Those are the kind of things you would want to worry about. And that Upgrade Assistant actually will walk you through your project step by step. It's not automatic. It's literally an interview. And it'll go step by step and back stuff up at each step. So I moved my application over to .NET Core. And I did it a little bit at a time because there's 3 apps. There's the Hanselman.com brochureware site, the Hanselman podcast, which is a little more complicated, and then the blog, which uses web forms, which is awesome in 2002, less awesome now, and also does not cleanly move over to .NET Core. So what is the thing that is the most valuable? What is the most useful, what the intellectual property here is what? It's the URLs. Nobody cares what it's running. They care that they type the URL, I do a get, an HTTP get, and something gets returned. So what the intellectual property here is the Google juice. Right? You Google for a thing, you get a link, you click on the link, and it doesn't tell you this is moved. It just takes you there. So the value, the money in what I've got are my URLs. And these URLs are, I think, architecturally an aspect of cloud engineering that people don't use enough. The most important thing that isn't talked about in the cloud is how useful DNS is. DNS is how you solve problems. What that means is reverse proxies. So how do I move multiple websites with these different URLs to the cloud without anyone noticing? How? Talk to me. Why is DNS so important here? Okay. What? Do you want to say that? Routing? Yep, you're right. We're going to go and do some routing. Cloudflare, Traffic Manager, Azure Front Door. What we can do, though, is remember that in the old days, in 2000, you would have an A record, a DNS A record, that would point your URL, your DNS record, directly to an IP address that was an actual physical computer. So when you pinged Hanselman.com 20 years ago, you got that French-Canadian machine. You didn't get the front door, you didn't get a router, you got that computer. That doesn't happen anymore. Nobody puts an actual machine on the internet anymore. They front it. They front it with a router, like she said. They front it with Cloudflare. And if you've ever gone to a website and you get that little Cloudflare threatening, like, I don't know if you're a real person or not, and then they make you solve a puzzle or whatever, that's DDoS protection. So I can start doing DNS tricks to make sure that I can move my site without letting anyone know that I'm moving my site. So I set up staging.hanselman.com. and I duplicated my brochureware site. And then I've got 2 records. I've got what's called the A record, or the naked domain, the apex domain. And I've got a C name, which is www. So when you type in www.hanselman, or you type in hanselman.com, it doesn't go to the machine anymore in Canada. It goes to Azure Front Door. And then 50% of the traffic goes to staging and 50% goes to Canada. In fact, I started with 1% and 99%, and I just slowly moved it over. And what I was doing was I was simultaneously rewriting the site here and deploying it with continuous integration and regularly updating while watching for the yellow screen of death on the bad machine over here. So then once I got it to 50-50, half the people might get the error while the other half are getting a good experience, and I was slowly moving it over. By fronting stuff with a reverse proxy in the form of, again, Cloudflare or anything like that that has the traffic terminate at that front level, you get a lot more control. This matters in a world of the cloud because there's no rule that says there has to be a VM on the other side of that. It could be an Azure function. It could be an Azure app service. It could be Kubernetes. It doesn't matter. It could be n number of app services. DNS is your friend, and no one seems to talk about it. Additionally, you can do stuff like with Hanselminutes.com, where people were saying that it was slow. People overseas were upset with me, and they said the website was slow. And I realized that the issue is 900 pictures were loading from a web server. So instead, I'm going to open this image in a new tab, and I'm going to point out that these are loading from images.hanselminutes.com, which is a CNAME, right, an alias for a subdomain of a DNS record that runs on a content distribution network. So then my friends in India would get fast images because everything now gets loaded off of that, and I don't have to do anything. In fact, this is like hanselmancdn.azure websites.whatever.net. That took me minimal effort, and all I had to do was change my code from www to images. That's an example of like the cloud making one person look like a 10x developer. We used to hire consultants and fly them in to do stuff like this. And now it's a checkbox. Like that's what I think is so exciting about the cloud. Like I've got young people at work that will like move the slider bar and push save and be like, oh, this website is taking like a minute to deploy. Blah. We flew consultants in with like suits and stuff to configure load balancers, and now it's a checkbox and they think it's not fast enough. I have a 3-page resume. I have been in tech for 32 years. What is page 2? Configuring a load balancer. So now I have a 2-page resume because I ripped that page out because it means nothing. Now, as an old person, I can be sad about that, but I actually think it's awesome because that just means that all that work that we did in the 90s makes your life easier because it was toil. It was awful. It was miserable. So now I have page 1 and I have page 3. We don't talk about page 2 anymore because it's a checkbox, and now you all get the benefits of that. So I like to talk about how amazing it is that we can have these kinds of features available to us, and you don't have to deal with the toil, the tedium of this stuff. If I go over here to portal.azure.com. By the way, how long have I been talking? 20 minutes? 25 minutes? Someone should know. You have an idea? No? Shut me up when the pizza comes. Okay. 2025. I'm going to go ahead and log into the Azure portal and check this out. I do work for Microsoft in my daytime, but in my day job, but make sure that you never listen to a Microsoft person if they have unlimited Azure credits. Because I'm not joking. Azure people and Microsoft employees that have like free Azure use it wrong, right? When you are actually spending your own money, you're not like, woohoo, I'm spinning up VMs, right? Let's make a giant SQL server in the cloud. This is my own money, y'all. So I did an entire blog post series called Penny Pinching in the Cloud that you can find out like how to make, how to save money on Azure, how to deploy containers, how to run and manage. So yeah, it's my cash. Don't listen to people who have unlimited plans. So if we go over here to Azure Front Door, go here, click on the front door, pause for effect, Front Door Designer. There we go. So you can see right now, staging is not routed anymore. And then I've got back-end pools to manage that stuff. All of that was fronted for me. And then I separated the main page and the blog in order to do this. Now, I was mentioning before about .NET Core. I was upgrading this to .NET Core, and this was .NET 1.1, which is the old one from 2002. And this is the new fancy one. And what did we say it was? 2017? It's crazy. 16? Madness. While I was doing this, I realized that my old legacy application not only was old code running on Windows, but it was also not very mature from a software practices perspective. I was like right-clicking and going publish in Visual Studio instead of using things like continuous integration and stuff like that. So there's an opportunity here to get the thing to build reliably. And in order to do that, I wanted to also make it run on Linux and things like that. So let's go over here to like hanselminutes.com, which is my website. This is my cool prompt. If you go on Google for Hanselman Pretty Prompt, I will tell you how to set this prompt up. This has my current folder. This is my blood sugar in real time. I'm not joking. I have an implant in my arm right here and another implant right here. And that is a REST API for my body that's showing you my blood sugar in real time. So if we go up here and go like this and go like that and then go like this, that's my blood sugar. And that's a live chart of my blood sugar over time, including whatever I had for lunch. And then this is a predictive curve of the future of my blood sugar. And I think that that's just as important as things like my Git branch, which is the next thing right here. So blood sugar, picture of a needle, my Git branch, and then the version of .NET that I'm currently using. Okay, so you don't need to have your blood sugar there. By the way, you can have whatever makes you happy. Um, and what's the hotkey in Visual Studio to build an application? Come on, people, what's wrong with you? Control Shift B, right? So I push that button a lot. So I made a hotkey in PowerShell that automatically types .NET build when I hit Control Shift B. Those little things save you like lots of time. It saves me like half a second, but like over 30 years, it could add up, right? Okay, so I just built my application here, and if we go and say, and I've also got a whole thing on my blog about how you can get cool predictive text on your prompts and stuff like that. So let's go into the next folder and let's say .NET Run, and go ahead and run the podcast site locally here, and then bring this up. So now I can click on, I'm using Windows Terminal, which is really awesome. If you're not using it, you should. Notice that the URL is clickable, which is cool. And let's go over here. And it's probably mad at me about some certificate that's not right. Attackers! Security certificate expired days ago. Oh, that's not good. Is my clock wrong? No? Interesting. Let's try and check this out real quick. What is the thing in .NET to say .NET Dev Certs Trust? Try this again. I might have a cert issue. Oh, there it is. So there's the site running locally, right? Localhost, whatever, whatever. So that runs on Windows. So I'm doing my development work here, but I'm realizing that Windows Server 2000 may not be the move. Windows itself may not be the move. It's cheaper to host on Linux. So then I should probably get this site running on Linux, right? So I'm using Windows Terminal and I'm using Windows 11 and I'm also running Ubuntu, because if you haven't heard, you probably heard that we can run, like Windows runs Linux now. WSL. I've also got all these other Linuxes, which are great. So I'm going to go ahead and run Ubuntu. And I've got the Ubuntu logo down here, and I changed all the colors to look cool, which is nice. So we've got Windows over here in my app builds. Now I've got it over here as well. And let's go to the same place. And we'll say .NET Build. So now I can build and test and run on multiple places. So then once I get that working, now I can build it on Windows. Let's go ahead and run Docker Desktop on this machine here. Where's Docker Desktop? That I'm having an issue on this particular computer where if I run Docker, another app starts. I have to run it directly from Explorer. Not sure why. Okay, so I made Docker Docker PS1 files and a Docker file here, and I'm doing all of this while I'm learning about moving over to Linux. So I'm using my blog as an excuse to learn all this stuff back in the day. I'm going to type code dot. Notice that it's installing VS Code Server. I'm going to make sure we saw that. I'm in Ubuntu on Windows running VS Code. It's then installing the Linux version of the server, jumping back over into here. I'm in now the Windows version of VS Code, but I'm talking to Linux. So if I go Control O, that's the Linux file system path. You following me? I know I'm moving fast, but apparently there's pizza coming and I can't talk too much. Yeah. I have 30 minutes left. It's very threatening. Finish up, Hanselman. Yeah, Hansel minutes. Yeah, so I got like 2 hours, right? Okay, so now I can go Docker build, and now I am on Windows under Linux running a Docker file of that application because I'm using .NET Core. As soon as I got out of the Windows um, the Windows dependencies, made sure that I didn't have any registry stuff, I didn't have any paths. Once a .NET app runs on Windows, it's trivially easy to go and run it on Linux, and then trivially easy to go and make a Docker container and then run it up anywhere. I could run it in Linode or AWS or Azure. And in this case, I'm running it on App Service for Linux containers because it's 30% cheaper than the Windows one. So during this move, it's going to get cheaper, which is awesome. And then while I was in there, I was like, well, what would be an even cooler thing to do? I would go and add in Playwright testing. Has anyone ever used Playwright? Right, like Selenium. Playwright is a Puppeteer style testing framework. I had unit tests that would test my units of work, and then I had integration tests that would test my database work. Playwright tests actually automate browsers and click on buttons for you. It's amazing. It's test automation. And you can then do headless tests inside of a container, which is freaking insane. So I have two folders. I have two scripts here. One is called headless tests, and one is called, and I don't know if this is the right word, headed tests, which I think is the opposite of headless. So these are the headed tests here. And I think this is a Linuxism. You see how these are green and these aren't? I need to make those executable. I call this schmodding, so I'm going to schmod those. You got a better name? Oh, it's chmod. No, it's not. It's schmodding. You schmod it. And then this is shushing. When you shush into a computer, you just shush right in, right? Don't you agree? Try. Oh, here's the thing. Your coworkers may not be here, right? You came. You're a better person than your coworkers. You invested in your career. You came to the user group. Your coworkers, they're watching Netflix, right? They're watching One Piece right now. I want you at work tomorrow to just casually say, well, yeah, we need to go and shush into the machine. And then when you say that, you got to put a little zhuzh. You got to put a little zhuzh on it, right? And you say it casually, though, and they're going to think that all these years they've been wrong, right? And we're going to get this to become a thing. And we're not, oh, yeah, I've been shushing into production for years. What's wrong with you? What do you call it, weirdo? And then just see if it catches on. And then once you get the bosses to start shushing around into computers, then it's going to be awesome. Okay, so let's do some headed tests here. So what this is actually going to do is it's going to spin up these headed tests, which are going to install Chromium, Firefox, and all those different things, and then they're going to pop up in the, and you're going to see the actual browser pop up. I think I did this. I think I ran this one in. This may have been a mistake. I ran this one in Linux. Let me try that first. I'm going to do the headed one over here and the headless one over here. So give me 1 second. This will be worth it. The payoff is good. Okay, so we're in Windows now, and it's getting Firefox, WebKit, and Chromium. It's running my unit tests. The code coverage just went by, if you saw that. Player, this is a regular test. Okay, look, no hands. What's happening? I'm not touching the mouse. What? Someone else is clicking. The test is coming from inside the house. You see how it's doing that? It's actually it's clicking on stuff. Like, this is the thing. You would not believe how often people will do something twice and then 3 times and then just mindlessly day after day, multiple times, when you can automate it. So that was a headed test. Now we switch over here and we'll go and do headless ones, which means it won't pop up the browser. It's still clicking. It's still firing up Chrome. You just don't see it, which means that if it doesn't have to paint to the screen, you can do it in a Docker container. So now I'm going to run all of those same tests headless inside of the Docker container. And if I can do that while that's happening in the background, I can go back over here and I can go to Azure DevOps, logging in, logging in. Come on, Azure DevOps. Here we go. I've got all the sites up there. The blog. The blog is actually using an engine called Das Blog, which is German for the blog, if you were wondering. And we've converted that to, it's a true story, we've converted that over to .NET Core. And we can go into the pipeline here. And what's cool is you can see yesterday there was a build. We bumped the version number of the Markdown parser. I can then click on that, go down to the job, look at the tests, and actually see the logs of exactly the tests running, how long they ran, all of that work now. Now, we hear this term in social media a lot with a 10x developer. It's bullshit. It's a bad term. 10x, saying 10x developer is just making regular X developers feel bad about themselves. It implies that someone is literally 10 times more productive than you, and you'll never be that good, right? It's like there's Olympic level C#, and then there's like regular people. I don't like that. It's gatekeeping. It's not cool. It's not about the person. It's about the tools, in my opinion. Now, remember when I said in the past we used to fly in consultants? If you wanted like a dashboard or something for your website, you would have to have a consultant come in and create a dashboard. It's the tool. Things like the cloud allow us to have these dashboards or these processes. So I can go to like something like Azure, and it's loading my dashboard for my application. We used to hire people to make dashboards this cool. We'll see if we get, there we go. I've got 318 people on the site right now. We're going to get some charts here in a second. This is super cool. Like, you ever go to like a startup and you get into their lobby and they've got like a screen that's mounted on the wall like this with like maps and like pins of all the places that they're doing business or whatever. I always thought that was really impressive. I'm like, wow, if I ever raised $1 million, I would also do that. And then I realized that I could just buy a cheap TV and mount it on the wall and put the Azure dashboard up there, right? And then I could just put pins at all of the offices that I have globally, like every McDonald's that I go and use free Wi-Fi at. I'm one guy, one person, and I've got continuous integration, I've got a dashboard, I've got tests running in the cloud in Docker containers, and I feel like a 10x developer, but I am no more skilled than anyone else. I simply figured out how to do the tools. Look at this. Look at these failed requests right here. Let's go and select them, click in, figure out what's going on there. Looks like we've got someone posting to /index 13. Wow, okay, 30,000 times. That's problematic. Let's go ahead and see here. We've got an error 400 happening. Let's click on post index over here. Looks like it's happening in production. Let's go ahead and show all the request properties. It's happening from someone in Iowa, so a script kiddie hiding their IP address is trying to post to my website, which is not something that you're supposed to do. And now I can go and click show me available telemetry 5 minutes before and after this event. I keep bringing up age because the great thing about being an old programmer is that I remember when we didn't have this stuff. And I tell the younger people and the early in career people this so that they appreciate how glorious it is to be able to do that. We would have been writing regular expressions to go through logs to even get close to trying to figure this out. And now you don't have to do that. And that is so wonderful. I'm so happy for you all. Because if you've ever written a regular expression, it's just, they basically look like swear words. And then you don't know why it works and you have to debug it. And then one of your coworkers is like, oh, it's like this. Why didn't you do that? So obvious. So obvious, right? You know, and you know the whole joke about regular expressions, right? So you've got a problem and you're going to solve it with regular expressions. So now you've got two problems, all right? But look at this. Like, it's unconscionable to me that I can go in here, figure out exactly what someone was doing 5 minutes before and after, and I didn't have to look at any log files. I didn't have to hire a consultant. One person. That's what's so cool. That's why I joke about it being like Hanselman International. But what I also think is cool about this is that other than running the website in Azure, it's the running part, I'm not selling you anything. Everything I'm showing you is free. You have all of this. DevOps is free. GitHub Actions is free. .NET Core, free. Open source. WSL and Ubuntu in Windows 11, you already have this. Even if you have Windows 11 Home, free. We put it in Home, not just in Pro. There's literally nothing here that costs money except for the actual running of the website. So if we go back to the website, which I told you I was running cheaply because I am cheap, we go back to Home, and we go and look at the core website. We can note that Hanselman It's Core Linux is running in this resource group called hanselmanits.com. And I'm looking for an app service right here. Hanselman Linux, app service plan. Number one mistake when using Azure that makes people hate Azure and think that it's super expensive is they make one website per app service. And they go, that's like $50. That's too expensive. You suck, Microsoft. Eh. You can hear the $ when they said Microsoft. What I'm doing is I'm running as densely as I possibly can. I am running the blog, the main site, the podcast, and Azure Friday, which is a totally different website, all in a single app service. I can go into that app service plan, and I can scroll down, and I can show you the CPU barely pops up to 10%, but the memory is really full. Now, this is interesting because if I was running on that physical machine that we talked about when we started this whole talk, I would be like, wow, that memory pressure is high. We need to get that thing fixed. This is not acceptable. But it is acceptable in the cloud because it ain't my car. And when it's a rental, you drive it differently than it was your car. Additionally, CPUs are slow in the cloud. People are always disappointed when they discover that, wow, this isn't as fast as my machine. Well, CPUs are expensive in the cloud. But you know what's cheap in the cloud? Memory. So, remember how I mentioned that I've got 17 years of podcasts and I've got 22 years of blogs. What database do you think that I'm using? Cosmos? Yeah, Cosmos is my idea. Let me show you my database. We'll find out how I can do it cheaply. Blob storage. Lower your expectation, kids. It's going to get bad. SQL. Access 95. Now you're really dating me. No, friends. XML files. Yay! XML files. How many XML files, Hanselman? 5,000 of them. Okay. See, she was so impressed. See? 5,000 XML files. Why? Because it freaking works. How much does it cost me? $0. Why is it awesome? It doesn't matter that it's XML. It could be one XML file with 5,000 entries. It's one per day for the last 17 years. It could be INI files. It could be JSON files. This is, again, elder programmer expressing to possibly younger programmers that the file format doesn't matter, right? YAML is XML, except with white space. JSON is XML, except with curly braces instead of angle brackets. It's all the same. It's just hash tables. It's name value pairs. So it doesn't matter because all of this gets loaded up into a data structure and it's in memory. Remember that memory is cheap. So gosh, what should I do with my 5,000 XML files? I load them into an array of blog items and I hold them in memory. How much do you think, how much memory is used for 22 years of blogging with 5,000 XML files? What do you think? A couple of megs? No, 300 megs. 300 megs. So what would the overthinking programmer do? The overthinking programmer might like try to be future proofing. Well, what happens when it gets to be a gig? Well, when I've been blogging for 60 years, we'll worry about that, right? Is it fast enough? No, there are some slowness issues. When do you think the slowness happens? When you start the website. And what happens after that? Nothing. Nothing happens. And I want to make sure that it's clear that Magnus said nothing happens because if you do nothing, you can do it infinitely. Okay? How many milliseconds do you think it takes to get one of these blog posts up when it's in memory? 2. 2 milliseconds. That's right, because it's just a hash table lookup. Does it matter? Well, what about the cache? What about when you change a blog post? How often do you think I change a blog post? Maybe once a week. So what do? Reload the cache. Why am I telling you this? Because in cloud architecture systems, we are overcomplicating stuff. No disrespect to any of the questions, whether it be Cosmos or MySQL or whatever. Here's the thing. You don't need to go back to the database if the data didn't change. The data is changing a lot less often than you think it is. 25 years ago, I was working on a website called 800.com, 800.com, pre-Amazon. We had a deal where we were selling 3 DVDs for $1. It was insane. And it was meant to bring people to 800.com. And it changed the scaling structure of how our website worked. The way we designed it was we had a very robust product catalog, and then we had a separate application that was the shopping cart. And 99% of people were browsing, and 1% of people were in the shopping cart. But then when we changed it and we made everything 3 DVDs for $1, everyone got them into their shopping cart, and now we've got 99% of people trying to give us $1. So figuring that out, and then also having a boss saying, well, what about real-time inventory? Real-time, when a suit says it, is not real-time, right? They were like, I need up to the second inventory. No, you don't. How often do packages leave the building? How often does inventory actually go down, right? We figured out that what real-time meant for the suit was actually 5 to 10 minutes. So we put a little caching on it, cache the re-inventory for 5-10 minutes, and suddenly our site is scalable again, and we can start moving people through the shopping cart. That kind of pragmatic architecture was good sense in 1995, and it is good sense now. Caching is cheap. Redis is cheap. Cosmos is great, but don't go to Cosmos for every call if you can have a cache between you. And the cache doesn't need to be Redis. In this case here, I could have done it in Redis, but I just hold the whole thing in an in-memory hash table, and it works just fine. Same thing applies to the podcast. I keep my memory pressure high. I keep my CPU, that spike is mostly just images. And if we go and look at the, let's go and look at, let me go back to the dashboard, and let's see what our responsiveness is. Average call to the site, 4 milliseconds, right? How much does it cost me? Price of 1 app service. So this is kind of just like giving you tips on how to make your applications, awesome as well. Keep the processor time low, keep the memory high, abuse the memory that Azure gives you, make them filled up as much as you possibly can. Make sure that you can test everything end-to-end, both unit tests, integration tests, and playwright tests on both Linux and Windows. And this took about a month of spare time. And I moved all of my stuff entirely into the cloud. And it's still running there happily on the one app service. Oh, and then the other website I didn't show you is azurefriday.com. Not only do I have 900 podcasts, but I also have 750 episodes of Azure Friday over the last 10 years. So if you want to see cool people, these aren't marketing people. These are the actual engineers. So the whole point of Azure Friday is that these are the real engineers that built the actual site. So, she owns WordPress on app service, right? And they may not be as well spoken as marketing people, but they built the thing. So you can go and learn from the engineers. This lady here has got a PhD, and she built Azure Cognitive Services for Vision. So you can go and check these folks out on Azure Friday. And this website is running on the exact same system as all the other ones. And it's, as you can see, extremely responsive. And actually, speaking of responsive, I'll show you one other little trick, and then maybe we can do some Q&A, and I'm sure I'm done talking. I've got these 900 episodes here. How do you think this works? Let's see if we can look up like Anders. That's all on the client side, right? Because I just load the entire thing up in memory. I've got 900 of these loaded up into memory, and they're actually loaded up into memory on the client side. So I brought all the JavaScript over and then just run it in the browser. I think it's so funny that we have like a pocket supercomputer with like quad processors and GPUs and stuff, and then if you want to like sort or search, you send it back to the server. while the quad processor pocket supercomputer waits. So I use JavaScript to do a lot of that stuff. So there's actually only a client-side search system. There's no server-side search, and that cost me $0 as well. Yeah, I'm cheap. Cool. This was pretty cool. I thought this went pretty well. Do you feel good about that? Yeah. Any questions, comments, disagreements? Anyone think any of this was wrong? Because it's good to be wrong. How do you feel? You've never been here before, right? You've been here, but you don't know me from Adam. Yeah. So how you feeling now? You feeling pretty good? All right, I appreciate you. That's good. We converted him, everybody. Cool. I'm having fun. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm having fun. This is a really exciting time to be a developer. And I don't like the term "do more with less," but I do like making deals. And I find being able to do stuff with cheap is pretty cool. Any questions on the system or any questions at all? No. What you got? Oh, no, that's a great question. Okay, so let's separate that. I do not have to run the CI/CD pipeline every time. The CI/CD pipeline builds the blog. The the folder that I've got full of XML files is already on the website in blob storage and is unrelated to the actual deployment of the site. Clearing the cache can be done a number of ways. You can call a secret API endpoint and simply null out the hash table, and it'll go to the cache, and it's a read-through cache. It'll say, oh, there's no cache, and it'll rebuild it. So I don't have to do anything. If I write to the file system watcher will see it, invalidate the cache, and it'll just load it the next time. Yeah, so you don't need to do a build every time you change the block. Does that answer your question? Cool.
Do you write your blog post on Visual Studio?
Do I write the blog post in Visual Studio? No, I write the blog post using Windows Live Writer. I don't know if I have it on this machine here. We actually made a thing called Open Live Writer. Windows Live Writer was out in the Windows Live Writer was an application from like 2005 that came out with like Windows Movie Maker and a bunch of different tools. So then we open sourced it because it's awesome, and we call it Open Live Writer. So it's using was it BlogML Blogger interface? It's an XML format specifically for blogging, but I could use Markdown and MarkDig if I wanted to. But I just do everything in Live Writer. It's a fat client for blogging, and it's in the store. What about Copilot Chat?
You can't run Copilot Chat in Open Live Writer.
Nah, that's a whole other conversation. Not really an AI fan right now. I did a whole talk on AI at the conference in Copenhagen about the things that are problematic about generative AIs. Cool. Anything else? All of the media files that I do that are video, I host them on YouTube because I can monetize them, and then all of the images are on a CDN, and the CDN is then images.hanselman.com. So the images are delivered as close to you as possible. So if you hit the blog from Sweden, you're hitting it in Chicago, but all of the images came from Sweden. And then the videos will be, this YouTube is a CDN, so you get them fast as well. Yeah, so I've got a YouTube as well you might check out. That is called Computer Stuff They Didn't Teach You in School. Seriously, and it's pretty good. I've got a whole thing about carriage return line feeds where I'm being very stern. What's a carriage and who's feeding it lines? Where's the file? Generation Z and not knowing about how files work. Another one that I've got that I feel pretty good about. Git 101. This is a really good video. If you ever have trouble struggling with Git, I feel pretty good about that video. And then I did one that I thought was pretty good, was on What's the Cloud? Where I actually got someone to loan me an actual Azure rack, and I brought it to the house. Your eyes like opened up. Like I'll show you that one. It's real. So I like walked through the internals of like an Azure Stack machine, exactly what it does and how it works. Then randomly pulling memory out because that's what you do when you get a, what does this do? Whee! Right? And I went and I chopped up all the thing in chapters. So I walked through power supply storage. Like I realize that maybe for some of you all the stuff that I showed you today may have been very basic and beginner, but I feel like there's a gap in computer science education right now where we're not talking about the basics in a way that is respectful to the next generation. We just assume that people know this stuff, and no one teaches this stuff. You just expect it to figure it out. Um, I'm currently teaching my 17-year-old how to drive, and the relationship between teaching someone how to drive an automatic versus a stick shift is like fundamentally different because your relationship with the car is different if you drive stick. So I believe strongly in driving the cloud stick shift, and it changes your relationship you have with the cloud. Yeah,
Are there any side effects running multiple apps in one app service?
that's a great
For
question.
example, restarting, you have to redeploy
Hmm.
all the apps at the same time.
Great question. So the gentleman is asking about restarting noisy, what's called the noisy neighbor syndrome. Azure App Service can theoretically have a noisy neighbor syndrome, and I've never actually seen it. But restarting one app does not affect the other apps. I can deploy to multiple things. An app service plan in Azure is a VM, and an app service is an individual instance of your application. And while it's possible that one of them like running wild could slow the others down, I haven't seen it, but it is possible. But they are separate individual places. They can be shut down, restarted, and deployed to separately. So there are no downsides that I have seen.
You can actually also run two app services on one app service plan if you want more separation. And it's actually app service plan you pay for.
Yeah, the app service plan, that's a great point. The gentleman is pointing out that app service plan is the VM, that's the thing you pay for. You can have unlimited app services in an app service plan up until the amount of memory that it gets exhausted. So density is the key. The sweet spot, surprisingly, for app service plans is a premium, which you would think would be like a bad idea because it sounds expensive, but it's the one that gives you the fastest SSDs, the most memory, for the most reasonable price. Most people think you should use a basic, but a premium also gives you free SSL certificates and automatic SSL refreshing. So I stopped thinking about my certs. So if I go over to my app service plan, plan over here, I'm running 6 apps in a basic. So like the Keys Left website and Baby Smash, they're running in a basic, and that's like $10. The premium V2 is the sweet spot. So if we go look at the premium V2, and I go over here to scale up and look at the hardware view of those app service plans, you can see here the number of CPUs, the memory, and I'm running a premium P1 V2. So it's $73 a month for 3.5 gigs of RAM and one CPU. And then I can pay, if I pay double, which I would never do, all I get is double I get double the RAM, which I don't need, and then double the CPUs. But the difference here between what I was paying before, which was a standard for $60, for $15 more, I got double the RAM and I got an SSD. So you really have to read these charts and say, is this a memory heavy app? Is this a CPU heavy app? Is this a disk heavy app? It's a very rich table, but you really have to think about how hard this thing is going to work. And don't get like freaked out by the expensive prices. Go and like sort by cost per month and then pick your. So I just sorted by cost, and you can do perfectly reasonable stuff on these smaller ones. Like I'm running 6 websites for the $12 one because I'm just abusing the memory because for $12 I still have almost 2 gigs of RAM. So that's like 300 megs a website. It's not that big of a deal. And then on the premium that I'm running here, for almost 4 gigs of RAM, I'm not hurting at all. So I think the mistake is for people who just would do what's called over provisioning. They're thinking about it the way they thought about it when they bought the hardware. They're like, oh, I need a lot of room to grow. You do not need room to grow. scale up on Black Friday, have a burst, and then scale back down. Yeah.
Do you run several instances?
No, that's a great question. I do not run them because I haven't had any issues. My sites don't really have any significant downtime. Um, the second instance would be to kind of get that fourth or fifth nine. If you have 3 9s or 4 9s, if you get to 5 9s, then you can only be down 6 minutes a year. It's a blog, doesn't matter. So I don't really think about it. Plus, it only makes like $100 on advertising, so it pays for itself. But that's a good question. I could, but given the architecture that I have, I would have to declare one of the instances to be the writable instance, and the other ones would be read only. Because right now, all that XML isn't shared, and it's not a database. So I'd have 2 copies of it running in 2 different places in memory. And then when I wrote to the XML file, I would have to invalidate it in 2 places and then have them reload. Then I would go to a Cosmos or something like that. Yeah.
You mentioned.
Oh, wow, you took notes?
Yeah.
Rah, good for you, dude.
So right here at the top. What makes you these jokes?
Referring to page 6, Mr. Hanselman,
I'm just wondering what your recommendation is for starting a blog.
ooh,
Right? Maybe this.
you should do it. That is my recommendation.
I mean, this journey might not be applicable
Hmm?
for everyone. For
The journey of moving 20 years of blogs is definitely not applicable to everyone. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that you should pick a blog engine and you should start blogging. I hate to say it because WordPress is trash, but it runs 75% of the internet and it's a perfectly cromulent blog. So if you would like like a nice little Honda Civic, just get WordPress. It's going to probably run forever and it'll be fine. Another option would be to find something like Ghost or any one of the many open source blog engines. There's tons of them. I like DOSBlog if you're a .NET person. DOSBlog Core is actively maintained. We're working on integrating it with the Fediverse, so it'll work with like Mastodon. It'll make Fediverse feeds. We're going to make it support things like @proto and all the different federated things. I am very much an open web person, like bet on the open web. You could make your blog a PWA, a portable web app, and run it on an iPhone and that kind of stuff. You can also do that with WordPress. So it's kind of like, do you want to drive the car or do you also like messing with it in the garage and like opening it up? So do you want a blog that you need to kind of tinker with, or do you just want to write? If you want to write, Substack or Medium or whatever is fine, but as long as you bought the domain and you own the domain, that's where it is. But we do have app service WordPress. So if you go into Azure and type in WordPress, I think I'm getting pulled off the stage, kids. And you type WordPress, you can go down here, and we actually have like WordPress right built in. And if you go for WordPress on app service, it's actually a fully optimized and managed WordPress on Azure with the CDN and Azure storage pre-configured. So that's the balance. So any one of those is a good choice. Yeah.
A comment about the question about another instance. Just adding another instance of an app service will not give you more nines. I've learned this the hard way. Because if you don't have created it,
Another separate app service plan will.
yeah, okay. But if you have another app, but in the app service plan, you can say I want 2 instances. It will not give you another 9 unless you have created it in availability zone setup.
Yeah, so the gentleman brings up a great point. There's this concept of an availability zone. If you have an app service and it's sitting on an app service plan, and let's say it's on this rack in this region, in this location, and then you make another one, you don't have a guarantee that it won't also show up in the same rack. So an availability zone, it sounds like it makes it close together. In fact, an availability zone is the opposite. It's like stay as far away from me as possible. You might be in the same building, but you won't be in the same row, in the same rack, on the same hardware. So availability zones are ways of saying we are related, but we don't like each other that much. So stay away. And your availability is your responsibility. So you can say, I want these in the same building, but as far away as possible, or I want them in West Europe and North Europe, or I want them spread out. So it's like how far apart you want things to get. So his point about nines is a valid one, except for the fact that you can have two app service plans. You will get more availabilities, but it is possible that the whole rack could go down, and that would cause you a problem without availability zones. Thank you for that correction. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Yay!
fantastic.
Woohoo!
You will be
And something else. This is a selfish thing for me to share with you all, but like on the flight over here, I don't know if you all heard this, but I got promoted to vice president. Which, if anyone ever here like has any like young kids or whatever, you remember when they like gave you the kid, like, hey, here's a baby. You're responsible for this baby. That's how I feel. Like, why would they let me have a baby? I'm gonna mess this baby up. So now I feel like that, except like with capitalism involved, where like a vice president. Like, what are you talking about? I'm an idiot. I don't know.
great job.
I don't know what I'm doing, man. Thank you very much. I'm faking it. Fake it till you make it. That's what I'm saying.
It's life.
It is life, brother.
We have some pizza over there.
Yay!
Drinks here. Scott will be around. Enjoy yourself.
Yay! Thank you, Foo Café.